Hello everyone, this is my second reading presentation, and today I am going to talk about qualitative case study research design by Jennifer Tanoski 2015. So let's have for this article. If anyone has any interest, you can dive into it. Let's move on the discussion item. I'm going to primarily talk about three things: characteristics of case studies, advantage of case, and finally processes in case study design. Under the process is the preliminary case selection, data collection, and data analysis. So let's begin with characteristics of case study research. Case study research investigates a contemporary phenomenon and within a live context. The boundaries between phenomenon and context are inextricably linked. There will be more variables of interest than data points. Reliance upon multiple sources of evidence will yield data that converge into a triangulation fashion. So let's talk a little bit more about what is triangulation. It derived from navigational science, the act of bringing more than one source of data to bear on a single point. Data from different sources can be used to validate, elaborate, or illuminate on a single point. A research study design in which multiple cases, multiple informants, or more than one data gathering methods are used to strengthen the study's usefulness. So let's go back to the characteristics of case study research. Let's talk about few more characteristics. Primarily it is qualitative, but it could be quantitative or mixed method. It doesn't dictate a prescribed set of data collection and analysis method, avoids methodological constraint that might result in a priori assumption that create researcher bias. Researcher begins with a general inquiry interest upon an observed or pre-reported phenomenon rather than research design itself. There are three different reasons or purposes for a case study. So these are explanatory, exploratory, or descriptive. In explanatory research or case study, we try to focus on causal link between events. In exploratory study, we try to establish a deeper understanding of a phenomenon and are particularly when there is minimal primary research information available. The case study try to focus on bit description or context in which it occurs. So what are the advantages of case study research? By examining a single case, the researcher can get an understanding of the complexity of the interactions among multiple environmental variables, participants, treatments, outcomes, and also the multiple team. Case study design allows for a deeper description of a phenomenon. Case study research design allows researcher how a phenomenon occurs as opposed to documenting what it does or doesn't, which provides researcher and practitioner specific and tested information for rare and unusual cases. These research studies are easily combined with additional case studies to test as well as build new theoretical model. So let's talk about the process in case study design. The process, while it is complex, it should be systematic and intentional. At the center of everything is the research question. Researcher need to identify the supporting theoretical proposition. Another important aspect is to identify the unit of analysis, and the researcher need to determine the type of case study design, as we mentioned about three different types. And finally, the researcher need to be intentional about data collection and analysis strategies and techniques. So if we break it down, we can just break them into four chunks: primary or preliminary design, case selection, data collection, and data analysis. So let's get into preliminary design. The core of the preliminary design is the formation of the question or the general theme, and it comes out of the related theories and research out of the literature review. Then the researcher need to know the assumptions, and he or she will have to develop a general framework of the theory. Then bracketing or scoping the question so that the research is controllable, and defining the propositions for the consumer or the research proposals so that they have a clear understanding of the proposition, and defining the case and the unit of analysis. As the researcher analyzes their data, they should also be cyclical. There should be a cyclical review of the elements, and there should be some adjustment based on the discovery or the intelligence of the data. Let's talk about case selection. A case can be an individual, a dyad, a group, a treatment program, or even an event. Boundaries derived from the research questions. Criteria for inclusion or exclusion should be very explicit, and the researcher should have a very clear idea about relevant and irrelevant cases. One of the things the researcher need to decide is either he's going to have a holistic look or embedded look, or he's going to deal with a single case versus the multiple cases. So how the data collection takes place. A data collection can be viewed as a relationship between the researcher and the data that is observed, organized, and coded in preparation for analysis. Researcher become the key instrument for data collection. To improve the validity of data collection, researcher may utilize some techniques like triangulation, pattern matching, theory testing, replication logic, etc. Researcher must decide on type of data to collect, how much data to collect, and how the data is organized in preparation for analysis. During the data collection and documentation, special care should be taken for privacy and priority and proprietary restrictions. Interviews, direct observation, and participant observations are some of the key tools to collect case study data. Researcher should be aware of researcher bias and observer effect. Researcher bias comes from the researcher's own epistemological belief, and the observer effect derived out of the participant's awareness that the researcher is observing him or her. So as we mentioned, at the center of the thing is researcher become the key instrument for data collection. So the researcher need to have some skill set. The first is formulate appropriate question, interpret the answer using theory, existing research, and the phenomenon. Cyclically analyze the data without imposing researcher bias to discover novel or validating patterns of behavior. An objective observer, and in the avoid imposing his or her own presuppositions or a priori expectations upon the data. Throughout the data collection process, the researcher must remain both flexible and responsive. The investigator must have a commanding base of knowledge for the subject being researched. So let's talk about data analysis. Data collection and analysis should be viewed as a simultaneous activity with one aspect of the research process informing and assimilating the other. So under this section we are going to talk about three things: 3 general data analysis strategies, 5 data analysis techniques, and 4 principles that support credible qualitative research. 3 general data analysis strategies are relying on theoretical proposition, focusing on the review of the literature and the research question, thinking about rival expectation, maintain an open, flexible orientation to competing explanations. So the whole idea here is to try to build a case against the rival explanation, but at the same time we need to be very transparent about the existence of rival explanations and views. Developing a case description involves establishing descriptive scaffolding upon which the researcher organizes his or her case study. So 5 dominant data analysis techniques are pattern matching, explanation building, time series analysis, program logic model, and replication logic. Program logic models and replication logic involve matching empirically observed events to theoretically predicted events. So what that means, these two helps us to compare between our observed data and the existing theoretical model. So to support credible qualitative research, or what are the key characteristics of a researcher to make his or her research more acceptable to the community. First, the researcher must attend to all the evidence rather than selecting the data that best support the theoretical propositions. Second, by addressing all major rival interpretation, the researcher strengthens the credibility of his conclusions. Third, the researcher must address the most significant aspect of the case study, remaining true to the research question, theoretical proposition, and the data. And finally, the researcher must be able to rely on prior experts to apply insight to the data analysis and theory building process. So, in conclusion, this article provided me a model for my case study research design, and I hope you all will also find it useful for your research design. I know certainly you may not use case study research design, but there are a lot of common elements or components you should be able to be benefited, or you should be able to take it and apply it in your research design too. So thanks for listening and have a wonderful rest of the day.